Do you see my presentation?
Yes.
Yes, we see, but not in presentation format. You can.
Okay. Put it in presentation. Yes. Okay.
Maybe it's going to.
Is it working now?
Not yet. Yes, it's going. Perfect.
Is it in presentation mode?
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, it's okay. Let's go. No.
Okay. So
no, the previous presentation was better. I don't know what happened.
Okay, then I leave it like this. Okay.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
If you leave this is the right presentation.
Okay. So very quickly, as you said, I'm working at, as well as the previous two speakers, at the European Commission and in a service which is called Joint Research Center. It's the in-house science policy interface, if you want. I mean, our job is to support our colleagues in the policy making side with the necessary scientific evidence, data, information, and of course, dealing with soils. This means providing the necessary data and information to a range of policies, because soils is a quite cross-cutting topic. But specifically in this very short presentation I will focus on our recent work in the framework of this EU Soil Observatory, and few words also on the indicator dashboard that we very recently released. Let me just spend 2 words on something that I find crucial if we talk about indicator soils in general, and also on thresholds. There's a huge difference between dealing with soils or dealing with other environmental media like air and water, for example, which are much more homogeneous. Soils have the property that they are extremely diverse across the European Union, across Europe in general, across a spatial distance. So soils can be very different in different areas and in different locations. This means that you have very different chemical, physical, and biological properties that cannot be treated in the same way, in a very homogeneous way like we do for air and water. This means that you need to adapt your approaches and your indicators to the local situation. This also means that setting thresholds at EU scale or at the continental scale is extremely difficult because, of course, being the conditions very different, sometimes for some parameters, setting a single threshold across the EU may be extremely difficult and quite controversial. Now, having said this, we still work since many years in trying to bring together a homogeneous set of data that can allow policymakers, but also users and stakeholders in general to have data and solid information about soils across the EU and across Europe, and also beyond Europe in some data sets. And this has been done within our European Soil Data Center that is operational already now since more than 20 years, and that probably most of you know quite well. The data center now has been building on the data center. We have now proposed already since 2 years and already established an EU Soil Observatory, which expands the data center capacity, particularly, first of all, by further enhancing our soil monitoring system, our data flow to the observatory. This is mostly based about our Luca soil monitoring system. I will say a few more words later on. The second very important aspect is that the observatory is closely linked with our research and innovation efforts. The Joint Research Center remains a research center, meaning that we still put a lot of effort in collecting data and using data also for finding new research insights into soils across the EU. So research and innovation are closely linked with our effort to collect data and information. Another very important aspect of the observatory is that it aims to be inclusive. So it aims to be involving our stakeholders and all interested participants and actors in an open European Soil Forum. We already organized a couple of sessions of this open forum, and it's important that everybody has the possibility to interact with the process of data collection, so that the transparency of what we do is obvious for everybody, because data are important, but it's also important to understand how these data are collected, why this data is collected, and make this data as possibly available to everybody, then also for further analysis and use. Our own analysis then allows us to also operate what I will talk a little bit more in detail, our monitoring and our dashboard efforts, so that we have constantly the possibility to provide to external users a picture of the status of soils across the EU. And this is the recently released soil health dashboard. I really encourage you to use it and to go on this website. You will see the current proportion of land affected by soil degradation that is measured through the set of indicators that are used in the dashboard, and is currently reported at 61.5% of the EU surface. This is quite an important proportion of the EU that is affected by soil degradation processes. Now, the soil degradation processes are reported in the dashboard also in a spatial way. So you can also see a map of the distribution of the various processes or pressures that we have on soils. And of course, these soil degradation processes are overlapping also. So you have multiple soil degradation processes accumulating in certain areas. And that's what you see here. So darker areas are typically the areas where there are a number of processes overlapping, which is what we would call a convergence of evidence that in those areas there is a serious soil health issue. And as you see, this is usually coinciding with areas which are densely populated, because obviously soil degradation is connected with anthropogenic pressure on soils. Now, a quite important aspect of all this is, first of all, the selection of indicators. This is a topic which I think is coming back again and again. And one of the issues is obviously that on one side, from a scientific point of view, scientists and the scientific community is usually tending to come up with very meaningful and very solid indicators that are the ones that should be used in order to have a coherent picture about soil degradation across the EU. The main issue is that very often these soil parameters that would need to be measured are not measured in a coherent way across the entire EU. So we need to be in a certain way pragmatic at a certain stage and use what we have. So what you see here in the dashboard and the indicators used in the dashboard are the indicators that we currently have available with a full EU coverage. This means that these indicators are the ones that can be used currently to measure soil degradation in a coherent way across the EU. But this also means that future indicators that may be more meaningful or more scientifically sound can only be applied once we will have the possibility to have them measured in a homogeneous way across the European Union. The other aspect that is interesting in the dashboard that you can explore is the combination of soil degradation indicators by area that allows you also to see the interlinkages between these various processes and the interlinkages between these various indicators. So there is an overlap, as I said, and an interlinkage between the various indicators in those areas. Now, it's important also that we have the possibility to see these indicators in an aggregated way at administrative level. So obviously, one level is the national level that allows you, as you see here, to see how countries are doing for the various processes. For example, here for the soil indicator related to land take or soil sealing. But also, of course, you need to be able to disaggregate this data then also at low administrative level. In the current dashboard, you can go down to NUTS 2 level, which is usually corresponding to the regional level, so that you can go down to the administrative units where action can be implemented. Obviously, the most local level would be municipalities. For some parameters, obviously, this would be very meaningful because it's at local level that then we need to act if we want to change the current situation. Now, let me finally come to the important aspect that all this is only possible if you have a constant flow of solid, measured and harmonized data coming across the EU. And our current tool, as you know, is the Lucas soil monitoring system based on roughly 25,000 sites across the EU, where surveyors go on the field, take a sample. Important aspect is, of course, that all this goes to a single laboratory, so all samples are analyzed by a single laboratory across the EU. This is particularly important because our experience with interlaboratory calibration, interlaboratory exercises is that still the difference or the error across laboratories is pretty high across the EU, also for very simple measurements. So we need, if we want to be able to compare data, to have measurements done in a single laboratory across the European Union still. Hopefully in the future this will improve also with the improvement of the harmonization of methods and harmonization of procedures in the various laboratories. Now we have data already available for a range of surveys. As you know, we started in 2009. We have data from 2015 survey, the 2018 surveys. We have currently ongoing the survey 2021-2022, which allows us to have also temporal analysis of what we are doing. As was said before, the aim or the ambition is to expand this with much more sample points, particularly with the full integration with national soil monitoring system, as was already presented by Mirko. This is also what the soil health law is aiming to propose, so that we will have an integration between the local soil monitoring system and the national soil monitoring systems, possibly using transfer functions to make data comparable between Lucas and the national soil data and information systems. As was said before also by Leonard, all this is closely linked to the soil mission and the soil deal for Europe. As was said, it's one of the pillars, one of the main elements of the mission to provide harmonization of indicators and the soil monitoring component. So we see our activities here closely linked with the research community and with the research activities linked to the soil mission. And I think this is a very important also to have new methods to develop harmonized methods across the European Union. Let me conclude that all this fits in a global, or let's say in a EU strategy, where the observatory is embedded in the strategy and is linked with a funding and coordination mission mechanism, which is the soil health mission. All this is, of course, fully documented, and I encourage you to go on the relevant documentation on the various websites that you can find here. So let me conclude with thanking you for the attention and encouraging you to go on our website, where you can find much more detailed information. Thank you very much.